Hello, my name is Bruno. I'm a PhD candidate at Federal University at ABC in São Paulo, Brazil, and I'm investigating how water availability affects the mutualisms between extraforal nectar-bearing plants and ants. Basically, all environmental gradients has potential to affect these interspecific interactions. Could these environmental gradients could be temperature, water availability, elevation, and so on. And with mutualisms between ants and plants bearing extraforal nectar, this is not an exception. In these mutualisms, plants secrete a high-heat solution, that's extraforal nectar, and the plants, when foraging to consume this extraforal nectar on plants, may defend plants against natural enemies. These are high heterogeneous interactions because we have different ants and plant species interacting together in all kinds of environments. So along the environmental gradients, these interactions may vary as well. And one environmental gradient that you know that affects these mutualisms are water viability gradients. It may occur because this is a high carbohydrate solution. Therefore, ants may give to this food resource some value, which may lead to some competition of ants to consume the extraforal nectars. But as drier the environment gets, more difficult may be to find carbohydrate resources, and higher may be the value that ant gives to these resources, increasing the competition to consume extraforal nectar. And we know that the anti-communities could be structured by competition, in which you have two main groups, dominant and subordinate anti-species. And we know that along a precipitation gradient, these two categories of dominance have different patterns of interactions, in which dominant anti-species interact proportionally has higher probability to interact with extraforal nectar-bearing plants in drier environments, and in wetter environments, subordinating species has higher probability of interaction. And not only ants vary in their traits, but plants vary as well. So some plants may secrete different extraforal nectars, which may be more or less attractive to ant species. As drier the environment and the higher the competition, it's possible that dominant ants interact with preferentially with more attractive plant species, which may which may lead to dominant ant species monopolizing the interactions, imposing constraints to subordinate ant species that may be relegated to the interaction with with less attractive plant species. This may lead to the formation of subgroups of interaction. And the formation of subgroups, so if it is true, may be driven in drier environments, and the formation of these subgroups may be driven by dominant ant behavior. To investigate these interaction patterns, we extracted from the literature uh, ant and the ant and plants networks, and we analyzed these networks. And we extracted two kinds of metrics. Network level metrics, which investigates the network as a whole, and what I called group level metrics, that are metrics that investigate the interaction patterns of dominant and subordinate species separately. So here, some metrics that we extracted was the size, that allows us to explore the richness of the networks along the water gradient. Modularity, that is the formation of subgroups of interactions, and which may increase as drier the environment. The connectance, that is the proportion of interactions made by ants and plants at the networks. And in here, because we expected the subgroup formation, we may expect that the connectance, or the proportion of realized interactions, may reduce as drier the environment. In the same way, the nestedness may reduce at drier environments. Nestedness basically is a metric that measures the heterogeneity in interactions made by some groups of species, where generalist species interact with all species at the network, but the specialist species do not interact with each other. And the group level analysis, we use the connectance of intergroups. That is the connectance of the networks, the proportion of interactions made from the total possible. But here we segregated between the connectance of dominant and subordinate anti-species. Of course, to investigate that in a water gradient, we extracted the mean precipitation gradient at each site and the day or days that each of the network was collected on field. To do that, we used the NASA's Giovanni and utilized the data from the Tropical Rainfall Measure mission. And here, what we found? Basically, from now on, in the x-axis, the mean precipitation rate, our predictor variable. In the y-axis are our metrics of interest, and each point represents each network collected from the literature. So, we found that as lower the precipitation, lower the size of the network. Contrary to our prediction, lower the precipitation, higher the connectance of the networks. Now from the net and as it meets with our expectations, it matches with our expectations that as drier the environment, lower the nestedness. And the modularity, besides the P, lower the zero point zero 0.05, this value was generated by this category of precipitation here. So, but along the precipitation gradient, the modularity do not vary. Okay, so we have no variation in modularity along all precipitation gradients. And the group level analysis, we saw that dominant ends connectance increase as mean precipitation rate reduces, which matches with the connectance of the network as a whole. But the connectance of subordinate anti-species do not vary along this precipitation gradient. So what may generate these patterns of interaction patterns? Basically, as drier the environment, lower may be the environmental productivity. This may be, therefore, in lower productivity environments, it may be more costly to plants secrete extrafloral nectar because it has lower carbons and the water available to secrete this kind of food resources. So it may lead to a lower probability of finding plants and natives interacting with each other. For in less rich communities or poorer environments, it's possible that the demand of ants for carbohydrate food resources may increase, which may lead ants to give the same value to all plant species as a food resource, which may reduce the selectivity of ants to interact with these plants. Therefore, ants may increase their proportion of interactions with all plant species at the network, which may not allow the formation of subgroups of interaction. But when we investigate the role of the ants at the network, we saw that the increasing proportion of interactions was not made by all ant species, but this was made by dominant ant species. Therefore, dominant ant species increase the number of plants that they interact in drier environments. So, to conclude, we saw that environmental factors has the potential, or environmental gradients have the potential to affect ant networks, but but the structure of these ant plant networks may vary in depending on the responses of what dominant ants are doing at the environmental factors that they are experiencing. That's all. Thank you. My mail is here. Let me know if you have questions, and I will be glad if you message me. Thank you so much.